I stood at the edge of my stepsister's 30th birthday party, champagne glass in hand, watching her laugh with a crowd of guests who thought they knew her. The venue was beautiful. String lights, elegant decorations, at least 100 people celebrating the woman everyone believed was kind, successful, and put together. My mom had been texting me for weeks, insisting I attend, reminding me that family is family, and that Kendra had specifically asked for me to be there. I almost didn't come, but then I remembered the small leather journal hidden in my suitcase, and I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting 14 years for. Looking back, I wish I could tell my 16-year-old self that one day the pain would make sense, that one day I'd be strong enough to stand in a room like this and finally speak my truth. I grew up in a quiet suburb where nothing ever seemed to happen, raised by my mom after my dad left when I was 8. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My mom worked double shifts at the hospital, and I learned early how to take care of myself, making my own meals, doing my homework alone at the kitchen table, finding comfort in the pages of my diary, where I could be completely honest about my feelings. When I was 13, my mom started dating Roger, a successful contractor who seemed kind and stable. He had a daughter my age named Kendra, and everyone kept telling us how lucky we were to be gaining a sister. At first, I believed them. Kendra seemed confident and popular, everything I wasn't. She had shiny hair, the right clothes, and a way of commanding attention that I envied. When our parents got married and we all moved into Roger's bigger house, I thought maybe things would get better for me. Maybe some of Kendra's confidence would rub off on me. Maybe I'd finally fit in somewhere. For the first few months, Kendra mostly ignored me. We went to the same high school, but we moved in completely different circles. She was a cheerleader with a tight group of friends who ruled the social scene. I was the quiet girl who ate lunch in the library and wrote poetry in my spare time. I didn't mind being invisible to her world. It felt safer that way. At home, we coexisted in a careful dance of politeness when our parents were around and cold silence when they weren't. I kept my distance and poured everything I felt into my diary. My fears about never being good enough, my desperate crush on a boy in English class who didn't know I existed, my insecurities about my body and my secondhand clothes, my loneliness. That diary was the only place I felt safe being completely myself. I kept it hidden in my nightstand drawer, never imagining that anyone would violate something so private. I was naive enough to believe that some boundaries were sacred, even in a house where I'd never truly felt at home. Everything shattered on a Tuesday in October when I was 16. I came home from school to find Kendra in the living room with 5 of her friends, all of them laughing in that cruel, pointed way that makes your stomach drop, even before you understand why. Kendra was holding something, and when I got closer, my blood went cold. It was my diary, the blue one with the broken lock that I had hidden under my mattress after the nightstand felt too obvious. She'd been reading it out loud. My most private thoughts, my deepest fears, my pathetic crush on Preston Dalton, who sat 2 rows ahead of me in English and had never spoken a word to me. They'd heard everything. Kendra looked right at me with this smile that wasn't really a smile, and she said, "We were just learning so much about you. You should write more. It's really entertaining." Her laughter erupted from her friends. I stood there frozen, unable to speak, unable to move, feeling like my skin had been peeled away and everything vulnerable inside me was exposed. I finally managed to grab the diary from her hands and run to my room, locking the door while their laughter echoed through the house. By the next morning, everyone at school knew. Kendra had taken photos of the pages before I got home. She'd shared them with her friends, who'd shared them with their friends, and suddenly my private pain was public entertainment. People I'd never spoken to would whisper and laugh when I walked past. Someone taped a printed page from my diary to my locker. In gym class, a group of girls started calling me Diary Girl and making up fake entries out loud, exaggerating my crush on Preston Dalton until he heard about it and looked at me with such pity and disgust that I wanted to disappear. I stopped eating lunch at school entirely. I started having panic attacks in bathroom stalls between classes. My grades dropped. I begged my mom to let me transfer schools, but she was so wrapped up in her new marriage, so desperate for this blended family to work, that she convinced me it would blow over. Roger sat me down for an awkward talk about teenage drama and suggested Kendra and I work it out between us. Kendra, for her part, gave a fake apology in front of our parents that meant nothing. The damage was done, and we both knew she'd never face real consequences.
I survived the rest of high school by becoming invisible. I stopped writing, stopped trusting, stopped sharing anything real with anyone. I counted down the days until graduation, and the moment I turned 18, I left. I got a partial scholarship to a state university 3 hours away and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. I changed my major 3 times before finding my way to marketing and graphic design, something that let me be creative without being vulnerable. Slowly, painfully, I built a new version of myself. Someone stronger, more guarded, but also more capable than the girl who'd been destroyed by her stepsister's cruelty. I made real friends in college, people who didn't know about my humiliation and never would. I graduated with honors, landed a good job at a creative agency in the city, and eventually started my own consulting business. I changed my last name legally, dropping my stepfather's surname and reclaiming my mom's maiden name, Waverly. Kendra and I barely spoke for years. I came home for major holidays when my mom guilted me into it, but I kept our interactions brief and surface level, never giving her access to anything real again. Then social media happened, and Kendra discovered a new way to rewrite history. She started posting throwback photos of us as teenagers with captions about sisterhood and family bonds, tagging me in posts about how grateful she was for her amazing sister and how we'd been through so much together. People who didn't know the truth left heart emojis and comments about how sweet we looked. It made me feel sick, but I never called her out publicly. I just untagged myself and kept my distance. Kendra had stayed in our hometown, working as an office manager and dating a string of guys who never seemed to stick around. She was still pretty, still socially connected in that small-town way, but I could see the cracks forming. Her Instagram was full of filtered selfies and inspirational quotes that felt hollow. She was nearly 30 and seemed desperate to project an image of having it all together. Meanwhile, my life had become genuinely good. I had a career I was proud of, a beautiful apartment in the city, a close circle of friends, and a boyfriend named Holden who treated me with kindness and respect I'd never expected to find. When my stepmother called to tell me about Kendra's 30th birthday party, I almost declined immediately. But then she mentioned that Kendra had specifically requested I be there, that she wanted to reconnect and put the past behind us. Something in my stepmother's voice, that pleading, desperate tone, made me pause. I agreed to come, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted to see if Kendra had actually changed. Maybe I wanted to show her that I'd survived despite what she'd done. Or maybe, deep down, I was waiting for something. 2 weeks before the party, I was helping my mom clean out the basement of her and Roger's house. In a box of old school papers and random junk, I found it. A small leather journal with Kendra's name embossed on the cover in gold letters. My hands started shaking as I opened it. The entries were from her sophomore and junior years, the same period when she'd destroyed me. I started reading, and what I found was devastating in a completely different way. Page after page of her own insecurities, her fears that her friends didn't really like her, her cruel calculations about how to maintain her social status, and detailed accounts of the mean things she'd done to other people, including me. There was an entire entry about the day she found my diary. She'd been snooping through my room looking for money to steal, she admitted that clearly, and when she found the diary, she saw an opportunity. She wrote about how sharing my secrets would secure her position with her friends, how humiliating me would make her look powerful. She even expressed a twinge of guilt, but decided it was worth it because she needed to stay on top. There was other entries too. Confessions about cheating on tests, spreading rumors about other girls, manipulating boys, and her constant fear that everyone would eventually see through her perfect image. It was a blueprint of teenage cruelty written in her own hand, a mirror of everything she'd done to me, but with full self-awareness. I sat on the basement floor reading until my mom called me for dinner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that diary and about Kendra's upcoming party where she'd once again play the role of the perfect daughter, the beloved friend, the woman who had it all figured out. I thought about a 16-year-old me sobbing in a locked bedroom, believing I'd never recover from the humiliation. And I made a decision. I arrived at the party in a black dress that made me feel powerful, with Holden beside me for support. Kendra greeted me with a huge hug and a squeal of excitement, like we were long-lost friends finally reuniting. She introduced me to her guests as her amazing sister and gushed about how successful I'd become, taking credit by association in a way that made my skin crawl. I smiled and played along, making small talk and waiting for the right moment. About an hour into the party, people started giving toasts. Friends sharing funny stories, my stepmother getting emotional about her baby turning 30, Roger talking about how proud he was. Kendra was glowing, soaking up the attention, her smile bright and perfect under the string lights. When there was a natural lull, I raised my hand and asked if I could say something. Kendra's face lit up. She gestured for me to come forward. I walked to the front of the room, and the crowd fell quiet, all eyes on me. I pulled the small leather journal from my purse, and I saw Kendra's expression flicker, just for a second, with confusion and then recognition.
I started speaking in a clear, calm voice. I told everyone that I wanted to share something special about Kendra that would help them really understand who she was. I explained that I'd found an old diary of hers, and that reading it had given me so much insight into her character during our teenage years. I saw Kendra's face drain of color. She took a step forward, but I was already reading. I read an entry about finding my diary and deliberately choosing to humiliate me to boost her social status. I read her confession about stealing and lying. I read her cold calculations about manipulating her friends and her contempt for the people who trusted her. I read her deepest insecurities, the ones she'd hidden behind cruelty and performance. The room was completely silent, except for my voice. Some people looked shocked, others looked uncomfortable. A few of her close friends exchanged glances that suggested maybe they'd suspected something all along. I didn't editorialize or add commentary. I just let her own words speak for themselves, the same way mine had 14 years ago when she'd shared them without permission. When I finished, I closed the journal and looked directly at Kendra. She was crying, mascara running down her face, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to speak but couldn't find words. "You taught me an important lesson when I was 16, I said quietly. You taught me that private thoughts aren't always safe and that people you trust can use your vulnerability against you. I spent 14 years rebuilding myself after what you did. I became successful not because of you, but despite you. This," I held up the diary, "this isn't revenge. This is a mirror. This is you seeing what it feels like when someone you trust exposes your truth to a room full of people. This is you understanding, finally, what you took from me." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. My mom was staring at me in horror. Roger looked like he wanted to disappear. But some of Kendra's friends, the ones she'd probably treated the same way she'd treated me, were nodding slightly, their expressions shifting from shock to something that looked almost like relief. I handed the diary to my stepfather and walked back to Holden, who took my hand immediately. Kendra tried to speak, her voice shaking, That was private. You had no right," she started. But someone in the crowd, one of the girls from her old cheerleading squad, laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious right now? You did the exact same thing to her. I remember. We all remember." Other voices started murmuring, and suddenly people were talking openly about things Kendra had done, rumors she'd spread, friends she'd betrayed, the careful image she'd maintained at everyone else's expense. It was like a dam breaking. All the social capital she had built over 30 decades was crumbling in real time. I didn't stay to watch the complete collapse. Holden and I walked out while Kendra was still trying to defend herself, her voice getting more desperate and shrill. We drove back to the city in comfortable silence, and when we got home, I finally felt something release in my chest, a weight I'd been carrying for 14 years. I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. I felt free. I felt like I'd finally closed a door that had been left open, letting in cold air and bad memories. In the weeks that followed, I heard through my mom that Kendra's birthday party became legendary in our hometown for all the wrong reasons. Several of her friendships ended. Her boyfriend broke up with her after hearing details about how she treated people. She deleted most of her social media accounts after people started commenting on old posts with questions about who she really was. My stepmother called me, crying, asking how I could be so cruel, and I told her honestly that I'd given Kendra exactly what she'd given me, a public reckoning with her own words. The difference was that I'd waited until she was an adult, in a room full of adults, at an event she chose to make public. I didn't ambush a vulnerable teenager in her own home. Roger called too, awkward and halting, and admitted that he'd never understood how badly Kendra had hurt me back then, that he dismissed it as teenage drama when it was really calculated cruelty. I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change anything. The damage had been done years ago, and this was just the settling of accounts. I didn't hate Kendra anymore. I'd done that work in therapy years before. But I also didn't owe her protection from consequences she'd never faced. The truth is, I'd spent so many years afraid of my own story, ashamed of the girl I'd been, traumatized by the violation of having my private self exposed. Kendra had taught me to hide, to never be vulnerable, to trust no one with the real me. Building a life after that required so much work, therapy, supportive friends, partners who proved slowly that not everyone would weaponize my honesty. When I found her diary, my first instinct was to throw it away, to be the bigger person, to let karma handle her in its own time. But then I realized that being the bigger person had never protected me. Silence had never healed me. And Kendra had never once acknowledged what she'd done or shown genuine remorse. She'd just rewritten history on social media and expected me to play along. So I made a choice, not out of hatred, but out of a bone-deep need for her to finally understand. I wanted her to feel, just once, what she'd made me feel. I wanted her perfect facade to crack the way mine had. And I wanted everyone who ever believed her performance to see the truth. Was it kind? No. But it was honest, and it was fair in a way that nothing else had been. Now, months later, my life continues in its quiet, stable way. I still run my business. Holden and I are talking about moving in together. I have plans and dreams that have nothing to do with my past. Kendra and I don't speak, and I'm okay with that. My mom has slowly started to understand why I did what I did, though our relationship will probably always carry the scar of her choosing Roger's comfort over my protection all those years ago. I don't regret what I did at that party. I don't lose sleep over Kendra's hurt feelings or damaged reputation. She had 14 years to apologize, to acknowledge what she'd done, to show any sign of growth or remorse. Instead, she tried to erase history and claim a sisterhood that never existed. I simply refused to let her. If my story touched something in you, if you've ever been betrayed by someone who faced no consequences, I want you to know you're not alone.
Healing isn't always quiet and pretty. Sometimes it's standing up and speaking the truth, even when your voice shakes. Sometimes it's refusing to protect people from the natural outcomes of their own cruelty. I've learned that you don't have to carry other people's shame, and you don't owe silence to those who never gave you the same courtesy. More stories like this are coming, because the truth is, we all have moments when we had to choose between staying small and speaking up. And sometimes, speaking up is the only way to finally be free.